Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study of the entire Bible, book by book and chapter by chapter and verse by verse. We are currently moving through the Bible, the Old Testament. We're in Genesis chapter 10. And this chapter here, Moses, and by the way, Genesis is written by Moses. The first 5 books are written by Moses. Genesis gives us a genealogies, okay? And the purpose of genealogies, is always to first and foremost demonstrate, improve the bloodline of Jesus, the Son of God. So that is the purpose of genealogies. Other genealogies pretty much show that they're not the bloodline of Jesus. In other words, so for example, remember we saw well, we haven't got to it yet. I'm reading it, but we're going to get to Jacob and Esau's genealogies. Well, obviously, Jacob's genealogy is extremely important. It shows the bloodline of Jesus through Judah. Esau doesn't, and it's so to be clear. Even Ishmael, we're talking about Ishmael. We're going to come to Ishmael, who was Abraham's first son, but he wasn't the son of the promise. You're going to see his genealogies. So the purpose of genealogies is to show that. What has been shame with this, what we're going to get into, is some have used this to try to kind of show the difference in the races. There were even study Bibles, okay? Study Bibles that study Bibles that even had this. If you have an old Dake's Study Bible, it had 30 reasons for the separation of the races, and he uses this portion of Genesis, chapter 11, 10, and some other ones to show why God's will was the separation. There's another one. I think Schofield also believed in the separation of the races. Again, I'm not going to talk about getting into racism, but this is one of the ways that racism was spread throughout the Christian church. That you want to see why racism was so prevailed so, because they would twist scriptures like the ones we're getting ready to study. In the last chapter, we talked about Ham. If you remember, Ham, the 3 sons of Noah, was Shem, Japheth, and Ham. Ham became a bad seed through especially Canaan. And Canaan, God, really goes in on Canaan, because he will produce the evil sin. And you could also even say the evil is from which every evil comes from in the modern world. We're going to see pagan religions kind of spring forth from here. A lot of the Babylon, Assyria, these things like that. These people, come. Canaan was a bad seed. So let's read, and but then we'll show you. These are it's going to show the breakdown. Let me say this too first, foremost. This is not talking about race, right? This is not talking about race, because how can you have race when Shem, Ham, and Japheth come from the same parents, which is Noah? See, so what color was Noah? I'm going to show you something And this is kind of just going to get an ideal, because I remember we talked about this in Genesis 1. But these are some Old Testament maps. And you kind of get a glimpse the kind of general area of where the garden might have been, but a lot of landscape has changed from that. But these two rivers there, one is the Tigris, another one is Euphrates. But notice the term Hittites. I want to see these terms: Assyria. Some of these you see the Tigris River there, Euphrates rivers. But again, you see some of these lands around here, okay, doing as these things spread. Look at Babylon. We're going to see that name Babylon coming up. Okay, and again, this is just to give an idea of just the kind of landscape there. Let's read. It says, verse 1, these are the family records of Noah's son, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. They also had sons after the flood. So in other words, they populated the earth. That's one of the last statements you saw, that the whole earth was populated through them. Verse 2, Japheth's sons, Gomer, Magog, Medial, Java, Tubal, Mesha, and Tyrus. Gomer's son, Ashkenaz, Riphalah, and Togarmah, and Java's son, Elishah, Tarshish, Kedemah, and Doman. Now, I'm butchering these names, I know, so anyway, forgive me. Verse 5, the coastland people spread out into their lands. These are Japheth's sons by their clan and their nations. Each group had its own language. Now, we'll get to the language later. Now, what is interesting is, and let me just say this, I'm not going to get into a whole big discussion because my studies is not in this at all. So I don't have a clue. What I would say is there are a lot of people that try to claim that Japheth, through Japheth, the European or Caucasian came. I don't know if you can prove that with these genealogies just here. Let me also show you this here verse. I want to show you this verse here. The coastlands, right? So what coastlands is he talking about? This is the kind of genuine area. I want you to look at kind of up there and notice right up at the top by Lake Van, right? It says Mount Ararat. Now, if you remember, this is where the ark is believed to have settled, which means this is where Noah and them would have kind of started spreading out, right? In other words, we know over time they just spread out, but this is where they would spread out, right? Now, my point is that, so look at the area where they are. Now, I want to go to another. I want to go to another verse and show you something, because again, this whole idea of race is a lot bigger than you think, that people think of. So let me show you this. And this is in Acts chapter 17. So verse 24 says, and God who made the world and everything in it, he is Lord of heaven and earth. He does not live in shrines made by hands, neither is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives everyone life and breath and all things. From one man, and this would be Adam, he has made every nationality to live under the whole earth, and has determined their appointed times and the boundaries of where they live. Now, let me just show you this here, because people, again, even use this verse to try to justify racism. And you might say, why am I spending so much time on this? It is a big problem even today in the church. Okay, so we're not going to get into racism, but racism is so pervasive in the church. It is unbelievable. And this is one of the verses that people use. We're talking about, by the way, in the modern times. We're not talking about 50 years ago either. A lot of people use this today. But they use this to say that God separated the nations. That the reason why God put the Caucasians here. And remember, Caucasians, the race, the definition of race wasn't an issue here. There were different groups of people, but they wasn't classified as white, black, yellow, and all of that. But they use this. But notice this verse here. Notice the next verse, 27. He did this. This is why he did this. He's appointed their nationalities and boundaries. He did this so that they may see God, and perhaps they may reach out and find him, though he is not far from each one. So that's the reason why. There's no separation, as people say, white people over here and black people over there. Which, by the way, I can't help myself. I'm just going to say this. The white people, even white Christians, had no problems with living with black people when they were slaves. It was only after slaves that black people became a problem. I digress. Okay? I digress. I certainly digress. All right, let me go back. So, so when we talk about the settling of these people in the coastland. Now, obviously, from these three, yes, the different races would evolve, right? Black, white, yellow, whatever. The different people would come out. God also put it in the DNA that produced different ethnicities, without a doubt. But it's not. There was never the separation of the races, as racists say. Okay. But Jephthah is believed to be, and the people use this as the Europeans. And I don't see it here. However, I am not a specialist. But Jephthah, so he said they became more of the coastland. Now, there's no doubt how any of the races spread out. We don't know. Okay, so verse 6, Ham's sons, and this is important here because remember, he really goes in on Ham, or Canaan, I should say. But notice, Ham's sons, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan, right? Cush sons, Seba, Halava. Now, if you remember, Halava was mentioned all the way back in the Garden of Eden. Saptah, Rama, and Saptaka, and Rama's sons, Sheba and Dedan. Again, I'm not in any way trying to pronounce these names correctly. Verse 8, Cush fathered Nimrod, who was the first powerful man on earth. He was a powerful hunter in the sight of the Lord. That is why it is said, like Nimrod, a powerful hunter in the sight of the Lord. His kingdom started with Babylon. I'm going to come back. Stop. Let me kind of back up for a moment. Because now we're seeing why Canaan was so evil, and his line becomes so important. Nimrod, when it said, and this has always been kind of confusing, the way that this is said right here. When it says he was a powerful, verse 9, he was a powerful hunter in the sight of the Lord. Almost kind of seems like God is kind of saying, yeah, he's a great man. Nimrod, what we know about him, Nimrod, even from history somewhat, is that Nimrod was, you could say, probably one, you could probably say that the ideal of organized pagan religions comes from Nimrod. The difference between Cain and Nimrod. Cain was an evil person, right? So you had evil people throughout. And so the bloodline of Cain, if you remember, no one called on the name of the Lord until Seth was born. But when you start with Cain, you remember, Cain was this, I'm going to say, personal religion. In other words, his approach to God was, God, you have to accept what I want you to accept. Now, Nimrod, on the other hand, he organized people. Now, this is important. You start with Nimrod. He organized people. So every false religion starts with Nimrod here in terms of organization. Which is kind of amazing, because when you think about false religions, and you go, why? And especially like with Nimrod, why? But every false religion starts with Nimrod. That he is the one that comes up, and now you see, you can go all the way back. And these religions would become so perverse. When we talk about pagan religions, and remember, the Bible is just not getting that graphic, right? We will see this, for example, when the children of Israel will build a golden calf. And Moses comes down and he sees this drunken, out of control, really, orgy. That's what he sees right here. But it was so bad that they were doing any and everything that was anti-God. Okay? Every sexual perversion usually is tied some way into paganism. Right? So if I wasn't a Christian, I would be, like really drawn to paganism, because, man, you can have all of the debauchery you want in the name of whatever god you make up. And that's exactly what they did. They made up these gods. Okay. So we're going to see how God is going to kind of stop this, because they're already now on a course that could lead to another worldwide judgment, or some kind of judgment. We see how God stops that. He's going to stop it. But you can see right here, the Nimrod, who is the seed of Canaan, right? So everything bad, right? Everything perverse is coming from Ham, Canaan. So now we kind of go back to Canaan's perverse, right? He looked at his father. So even if he didn't do anything physically, the fact that he looked at his father, and he just didn't do a glance, but he looked at his father, we see the perversity of it. So now we see it in Canaan. It really comes out in Canaan. Canaan is perverse. And he produces Nimrod. And Nimrod becomes, you can even almost say, an antichrist. This kind of a world leader, but he's leading people away from God. Away from God. And the worship is anti-God. Okay? And so Nimrod is that. So we'll pick up with this in the next study. All right, guys. I will see you in the next study. All right.